Well, the event sent shockwaves through American politics, obviously. Whoa, rippled through it, didn't it? But joining us now is US politics lecturer at Queen Mary University, Dr. Richard Johnson. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Have you ever seen America potentially more divided than it was that day? I mean, it's a silly question, really. There was a civil war, wasn't there?
Yes, I mean, there's a long history of political violence and mobs in the United States. It's something I've written about in a book where in the period, not just during the Civil War, but actually in the decades to follow, American politics was in an extremely divided situation. Now, a lot of the political violence that took place in that period was directed at state governments because that's where most of the political action those days took place. But there were examples of election results overthrown, governors chased out of their states and forced to resign. So there is this kind of deep history of violence and pressure that's put on the political system. So there is that historical precedent. Even the U.S. Capitol. There have been shots fired in the U.S. Capitol in the mid 20th century. Puerto Rican activists who wanted to leave the United States territorial claims and become an independent country fired shots on lawmakers in the US Capitol. So this isn't really entirely new in American history.
Richard, but do you really think that this is, in the same tradition as perhaps, historical revolutionaries? It was, a QAnon supporter and a bit of, a few QAnon and Trump supporters almost accidentally getting into the Capitol. And also, one of the things that I think, that whole year, if not the past 2 years, was full of, violence and rioting in many different cities in America around the Black Lives Matter protests. Is it not more within the tradition of the rioting that went on that year rather than any kind of insurrection or coup more broadly?
I think there is a point to be made that there is perhaps overemphasis on the security breach that took place, and that is seen as, if that's fixed, then the problems of American politics are fixed. And I don't think that's correct. I think that what happened on the 6th of January last year was symptomatic of a very toxic political culture in the United States, where what's called effective polarization, that is to say, people's sense of disgust towards people on the other side is growing. There's a diminishing of losers' consent. This has obviously been most clearly manifested from supporters of Donald Trump recently, but I think to a lesser extent.
I agree.
But it was there with supporters of Hillary Clinton after 2016, with some of the conspiracy theories that went on there. And my concern is that we're approaching a situation where whoever loses an election, whichever side that will be, will find it very difficult to accept that loss. And that, I think, is the real concern for American democracy moving forward.
Joe Biden obviously had a pop at Trump, didn't he, saying that he was watching television while the Capitol was being stormed. Presumably Joe Biden would have just been outside staring at the pigeons. But anyway, if there was an election tomorrow, do you think Trump would win?
Biden's popularity his approval rating is lower than I think he would want it to be. We have to remember that actually he won the election quite narrowly in terms of securing the sufficient votes in the right states. Only 40,000 votes across 3 states separated Joe Biden from winning or losing that election in 2020. What he really Biden needs to do to ensure his re-election is to consolidate quite a diverse coalition of both people on the left, but also kind of moderate independents. And the approval ratings at the moment among that second group, the moderate independents, are dropping quite rapidly. And if he can't win back their support, or they choose not to vote, or if the left of the Democratic Party chooses to vote for, say, the Green Party, then he's in trouble. So he's got a very difficult balancing act. And so, I think that there is a chance that if Trump, if there was an election tomorrow, to answer your question, Trump would have a reasonable chance of winning that election. And I think Democrats have to think about how they will respond to that. You know, if let's say Trump legitimately won the next election, are they prepared to accept that and see the process through? Because I think if they adopted the same practices as the Trump supporters of last election, then we're in a very, very difficult situation for the United States.
Yeah, and finally, and just very quickly, we don't have a lot of time on this, but I mean, one of the things that Biden accused Donald Trump on was taking a dagger to the throat of democracy. I mean, do you really think democracy was under threat? I mean, he is now the president, you know, the media establishment have coalesced behind him. In reality, you know, Donald Trump, the elected president, was removed from social media. I mean, in some senses, the bigger threat to democracy is the power that many big tech companies now have over digital public debate. So, I mean, who would you really say is a bigger threat to democracy? Those that are able to remove presidents from the public realm, or Donald Trump himself?
Well, I actually see it as I think that there are a lot of structural imperfections in the American constitutional system. That means that American democracy has never actually been particularly healthy. I think that the way that, for example, the Senate gives voters in California only 2 senators and the same number as voters in Wyoming, you know, that was okay in a time when there were rotten boroughs and Manchester and Old Sarum got the same number of MPs in this country, but it's really not fit for purpose today when California has a population larger than Canada, for example. I think this role of the Supreme Court is a concerning one. I think that the court has always been a concerning actor as well. So I think there are a lot of structural issues also that need to be addressed in the United States.
Well, thank you, Richard Johnson, a lecturer in US politics.
Dr. Richard Johnson.
Dr. Richard, apologies.
Doctor, for goodness sake, get it right.